Hey everyone, it's Gina Spagnola, President and CEO of the Galveston Regional Chamber of Commerce, and welcome to the Business Edge Galveston County. We are so thrilled to have our chair, our 2025 chair of our board, Keith Zahar, who is the owner of the Big Store community, regional, and I would say state champion. This man is a hero of mine. I'm not going to lie. He has done so much for not only the peninsula, Bolivar Peninsula, but really his time with his chamber has been so valuable. His expertise, his wisdom, his leadership has been so valuable to me as a friend and as the president of this organization. So welcome.
Thank you guys for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Well, you're an incredible person, and thank you for saying yes. So we're going to start off with some questions for you, and I love it when you hop on board with the leadership class. We take them to Bolivar, and this one will step on, and he gives them some business advice. And I mean, it's real stuff, y'all. It's not practiced. It's not
fun.
You've lived it, you've breathed it, and they love it. It's one of their best things. So we wanted to share some of this wisdom with you today. So we hope you'll stay with us for the duration. So we're going to start off with what prompted you to do what you're doing right now. You're the owner of the Big Store, but let's tell a little bit about the very beginning and your entrepreneurship and how you started the Big Store.
You know, a lot of people have a career path that they choose. Mine was survival.
Yeah.
You know, mine was just, I needed a job and I needed to make money. I needed to provide for people in my family. And that was what, I guess in the beginning, that was the opportunity I had to be able to do that. And as time went on, more of those opportunities opened up and it grew for me. And
you had a business partner too, a long-term
and that's what I was going to lead into. Dan and I, we worked together when we were teenagers, a little store in Beaumont. And as time went on, he got into other things and I stayed in the grocery business. And one day he said he wanted to build a store at the beach. And you know, I asked him, I said, you really think that's a good idea? You know, he goes, well, there's not one here. And I said, well, that's what I mean. You know,
that's good start.
I mean, maybe there's a reason there's not one there. So anyway, but he said, why don't you come with me? You know, and I go, you know, I wasn't doing anything at the time. So I did. And we'd been friends all those years. And so I came down there. I really believe, people laugh when I say this, but I really believe the only reason we made it is we were like that kid that didn't fall off his bicycle because we hadn't learned about gravity yet.
Yeah, I love that.
Because there was no reason for that store to make it. A lot of it was Dan's ability to pull a rabbit out of a hat, and we just, you know, and I knew how to make money, and he was just able to just come up with something when there wasn't anything there to do it with. And it took us 2 or 3 years to figure out that there wasn't a store at the beach isn't a regular grocery store. So even though I knew the grocery business, what I knew wasn't working. So we had to adapt and come up with a new plan and figured out that, you know, we got to figure out how to run this thing differently than a grocery store.
The needs are different.
And we did.
And that's what you do. The whole tagline of the Big Store is if the Big Store doesn't have it, then chances are you don't need it. And it's true. When that bus stopped there, the leadership Galveston bus stops there, we go there personally all the time. But when you stop there, it's endless. I mean, basically, if you don't have it, we probably don't need it. You've got everything from hardware to fishing equipment to clothing to groceries.
And that's how it evolved. Everything. Over the years, we would, and I was there all the time. Dad wasn't always there. And I would ask customers, well, what do you want me to carry?
Yeah.
And they would tell me and I'd bring it in. And, you know, over the course of 10 years, you know, you would get a product line from customers that shop there and you would learn what.
Yeah.
It was an entirely different product line than you would have in a normal grocery store.
Absolutely.
And then over the years, you know, that would change because there were always new products that came out and people want something different.
Yeah.
And we don't have 10 different sizes of Tide. You know, we have 1 or 2, you know, a large and a small. And because we're not that large of a grocery store and we're not that big a volume of a grocery store, but, you know, we've learned to
What was your
making-
footprint? How many square feet was the
We're
first?
12,000 square feet in the beginning.
And what are you now?
70.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we did learn that to carry the amount of different items that people were needing, we were going to have to grow. And after a few years, I told Dan, I said, Dan, I think we need to put in hardware. There's not a type of hardware store down here that people, to me, there are hardware stores. There were a couple of small ones, but they really didn't have. And so hardware was something that I really wanted. It was the kind of business that I liked and wanted to do. And a guy at a moment that I knew had a big hardware operation. He kind of took me under his wing and showed me how to do the hardware, the philosophy of the hardware business. But he said, you're going to have to adapt this to the beach. You're going to have to learn how to do it there. And I did, and it worked. I mean, it worked for me good, even though now is not the time to be in the hardware business with the building industry so low. But regardless, it's still working for me. And then, Shelley works for me. She came from Florida, and she'd been in the gift shop business, and she's done a wonderful job for us
She's done
in
a
the
great
gift shop.
job.
And we've turned it into the type of beach store that you see today.
I love it. What was one of the decisions of strategy that made a big impact on your growth? Can you think of one thing that worked? I think you sort of explained it, that you listened to people and you got what they needed.
We touched on it. The store is a lot bigger than it should be based on what it is. I can kind of touch on a little bit. Let's take a produce department, for example, and you take the percentage of things that sell in a produce department. You say green beans. Green beans only sell, or only 1% of the sales. So if you divide your rack up, the produce rack, and you only give it 1%, that means your green beans are only going to be 2 beans wide. Well, if you only put your green beans 2 beans wide, you're not going to sell any green beans. You have to make the presentation to the size that a customer is going to look at it and go, oh, I want green beans. So you have to make it a lot bigger than 2%. So, which means you're going to have to be a promoter, the type of person that promotes your business to the point that people want to shop it.
Yeah.
And so your bananas may be 12 or 15%. Well, you don't want your bananas to be 12 feet wide because you don't need it to be that wide. So you take space away from the bananas and you constantly fill your bananas, and you put your beans wide enough. I gave you that example because I want to tell you this. So you give everything its own life, and you do that throughout the store. So there's logic that goes into a person who promotes something. You do that throughout the store. You do that in the gift shop. You do that in hardware. You see that throughout the industry wherever you go. You see people put things on an end cap.
Yeah.
You see people put things, and they're promoting something to give it a spark, so to speak. During different seasons, you'll see in the spring, you'll see these big flower departments. And, in the fall. Yeah, exactly.
All the things for spring.
So you give everything its own life during certain seasons to try to promote it and try. Well, we do that ourselves through the gift shop in the summer, and we do it in hardware. We do it in the grocery department. Everybody does it during the holiday season, even though that's not a big season for us because it's in the wintertime.
Yeah. Well, it's summer, and I did summer games because you have the washer games or whatever. And so I'm like, oh, I need that at the farm. You had horseshoes. You had all of the outdoor games. So immediately, did I go there to get horseshoes? No. Did I think I was going to leave with a big washer? But it caught my attention because you had it, and it was all of these summer games, and so it worked.
Well, hopefully.
What's the best? Worked for me. So we talked about the best piece of advice that someone's ever given you.
If you're going to do something, think about the outcome, think about the results, and think about where you're going with it. If you can't come up with the answer and it doesn't have a positive outcome, then don't do it. That was probably, and I heard that when I was like 21 years old. A friend of mine's sister told me that. She was a couple of years older than us. And that wasn't exactly how she said it, and it just kind of stuck with me. And I always thought, wow, you need to think about the outcome of what you're going to do. And if you can't come up with the answer before you do it, then don't do it.
Yeah. If you don't know how it's going to end.
And so in business, it's kind of the same way. And if you're going to have a plan, then think that plan through and understand, at least have a good idea of where if you're going to put in hardware, have a goal, a medium to long-term goal of where that hardware is going to go someday. Don't just stick that there and hope for the best. But
there was a need, and you have a niche market, but there people are building over there. You're needing it. And if you have to drive to Beaumont to do that, you had the smaller thing, I would think, that they needed there so that they're not driving off. And so just identifying those things and
learn, no, you're going to have to learn how to do that.
Yeah.
Don't just go, okay, well, here, let's see how that's going to work. No, you need to learn how that's going to work and do it yourself. Don't anticipate that if you give it to somebody else, they're supposed to be able to do a good job.
Yeah.
If you can't do it, what makes you think somebody else can?
When I think of you and Daniel meeting on January 24th, our 181st annual meeting, when I describe you a bit, it'd take me a whole lot longer than the little bit of time I'll have that night. But I think of tenacity. I think of you as never giving up when all the odds were against you. So I know the answer to this because I've heard your story. I think you should write a book. But when all of that, when checks were bouncing and things weren't happening, and probably a lot of people had hoped maybe even that you fail, what was in you, Keith Zahar, that kept you going to become the successful leader and man that you are? What was the thing when a lot of other people would just be, I'm done? What was it?
Well, I mean,
or what advice did you give someone right now that's struggling and whatever they're doing? What kept you going?
I guess, well, I'm not sure what I might have said before that made you think that, but I had a lot of support from friends and family. Of course, Charlene would never let me give up.
Yeah. So that's good. Be with someone that's not going to let you fail.
Yeah, but
that's great advice.
I buy my groceries from a warehouse in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. And they had just gone through, and we're talking about, let's say we're talking about Hurricane Ike. Let's just use that for an example. And they had just gone through Rita and Katrina. And southern Louisiana had been destroyed practically from New Orleans to Cameron, Louisiana. So many of those southern cities had been wiped out. And I was working with several operations over there. We were talking about going in and putting in some stores. This was before we had gotten hit, because those areas, they were, it was like Andrew in South Florida.
Yeah.
It wasn't coming back.
No.
The stores were waiting on the city. The communities to come back. Communities were waiting for the businesses to come back. Stores didn't want to come back without the community. It was just catch-22. And so from watching that, I knew that our community wasn't coming back because it was like southern Louisiana. It wasn't a little bit destroyed. It was
devastated.
It was
devastation.
I mean, there was.
I'll never forget seeing it when I got over there.
Yeah, it was slabs. In fact, FEMA stayed for an extra year to try to study what caused us to come back. And part of their reasoning was the businesses coming back, and us being one of them. But what I knew was something that a lot of the other people didn't know. I knew that I had to come back, or that community wasn't coming back. So, I went to the water department. I went to Galveston School District, because Galveston wasn't going to reopen that school unless I went over there and told them that I was going to reopen.
Right.
They knew that community wasn't coming back unless I reopened. They knew enough to know that those people weren't coming back.
Yeah.
Unless that store came back. And even though energy was rebuilding, the water department was coming back in, they knew that community was not going to survive unless those businesses came back. And we did. It had to be the dumbest thing I ever did in my life. I put a 60 to 65,000 square foot store. Even my friends were looking at me like,
What are you doing?
But you got to remember, we opened that store with a lot less. I mean, we opened that store with a little bitty community doing a little bit of volume at the time. And I remember at the time I called Pat and Chris Doyle, and I said, look, you guys lost your bank. What are you going to do? And they didn't know, I said, well, look, why don't you put it in the store? And they go, really? You let us do that? I said, are you kidding me, man? As much as you guys have done for me, sure I will. So the bank's still there. And so they opened up the bank in the store. And
I love that too.
Yeah, there's a whole other story there.
There's a whole other story. Yeah, but we need to tell that story.
We do. Great family, great bunch of guys. I love them like family.
Yeah.
And that's another instrumental business that helped bring that peninsula back. Having the bank back, and having the title company back.
Yeah.
Store, so many restaurants. It just caused the growth. Now, it was going to take time. It was going to, to try to get all the houses and everything built, but they started building. And it's come a long way, It's like Galveston. I mean, Galveston, even though the structures were still standing, it wasn't like the 1900 storm, but they had to be redone. They were full of water.
Yeah,
full of salt water, so it doesn't matter. It's not like fresh water. You just can't clean it up. You got to rip it out and do it over,
I was describing you this morning at our executive committee. It kind of came to me when I was driving in this morning that you're truly like, and I consider this a big compliment because I loved Mr. Mitchell so much, but you're the Mr. Mitchell of Bolivar. You continue to save it time and time again. And I know they're so grateful. I know you were the Citizen of the Year this year. You're probably the Citizen of the Year every year. Okay, last question. What's the one habit or mindset that keeps you focused and resilient? That's my word I would use for you, is resilience. So what's the mindset?
I don't know. Maybe I just enjoy what I'm doing. I like you, I admire you so much because I wish I had the energy you do and could do everything that you do. It just astonishes me every day. Every time I look up, you're at one ribbon cutting and at one event, one thing after another. I couldn't keep up with you if I had to.
You do a lot, but thank you.
Well, I mean, I try, but I don't have the energy I used to. But I've always been one that I guess like you, I love our community. I love Galveston, I love Bolivar, Galveston County. There's so many friends over in the Texas City, Lamarck area, and I've grown to meet more people up in North County. This county it just got a lot of great people.
We do.
It really does. I mean, you think about a town, Galveston, it's basically a small town. Man, it's dynamic.
For such a small, all the things that are going on.
It is amazing the people over the past 100 years that have come out of Galveston, families. Man, it's incredible.
Yeah.
And I'm just happy to be a small part of it.
Yeah. Well, you're a big part of it. And I'm going to have you back, and we're going to talk about the second part of that Texas First Bank and the Dole family and belief, when you believe in someone and how you were able to repay that belief that they had into you. But thank you so much for all you do for a phenomenal year here at the Galveston Regional Chamber of Commerce.
I enjoyed that so much.
We just appreciate you.